Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode or a podcast of the Echelon Cycling Podcast. And as always, I'm joined by our two other hosts as well. That is, of course, Patrick of Outdo Cycling and our very own Mr. Critter himself, Ewan Wilson. And guys, very interesting week of cycling. We'll get on to all of it, but well, not all of it. Sorry, Tour of Algeria. Sorry, Tour of Taiwan. But anything stand out to you guys other than Milan San Remo?
There was a couple of funny moments this week, and some of the I don't want to call them like insignificant races, but they were just kind of like the footnotes of the week, and they were good races, and it was just really funny to see that. I think it was Stan de Wolf. I can't remember what happened, but entirely or why it happened. But he basically just rode straight on at a corner and landed in a huge pile of just animal manure, which was probably quite. It was quite funny to probably everybody except Stan de Wolf. I can't remember what the name of the race was. I think Ewan knows. Was it?
It's either Nogueira Corsa or it's the Coxeira Classic. Either it's one of those. They
Yeah,
kind of blended into one in my head.
yeah.
But also at that race, a terrible advert for Bianche for the Alsatian Ugo Offstetter, whose handlebars broke not once but twice during the course of Nogueira Corsa. Yeah, a bit of an interesting week in terms of memeability from Belgium. So we'll give them that.
Yeah, there's been a few bike mechanic like spectacular failures, but yeah, I think not really what you want. Like the one last year where he celebrated over the line and then the bike collapsed under him or whatever. I can't remember what
Oh,
happened.
yes.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
I
that
know who
was a
you mean.
strange one.
Yeah, didn't he used to ride? I can't remember what his name is. Eduardo Prades? Is that his name? He used to ride for Movistar, or something.
Yeah.
I think his rubber bike collapsed. Or like, do you remember when Jumbo-Visma's wheels just shattered? Great advert for Shimano wheels there. I think everybody was probably just a bit scared who was riding those at that time.
But anyway, we are of course alluding to the biggest. Well, we're not alluding to anything, but one of the biggest races of the calendar was there, Milan San Remo 2023. We were all very excited to see it, and yeah, guys, what did you think? We had four of the biggest names in cycling on the top of the podio.
I really enjoyed it this year. I know it is the classic kind of snoozing up to the Cipressa. And the Cipressa was surprisingly unselective this year in comparison to last year, but nothing extensive happened there. I think UAE tried to make it hard, but I think the wind direction just didn't favour them. And then just kind of flew into the Poggio, and it was so fast. I swear, like every year, it just gets faster and faster into the base of there. Bahrain took it into the base of there, and they were drilling it for Mohoric, and then UAE comes over the top of them, and it was probably, dare I say, one of the most exciting Poggios that I've ever watched. And I've been watching this race for over 8 years now. And I think that was probably the most exciting one that I've seen.
Yeah, it was definitely. I mean, with San Remo, you're guaranteed a wonderful sort of hour of racing towards the end, from the Cipressa all the way to the Via Roma. You're guaranteed action, and yeah, the speed was definitely super high. Maybe because sort of these other teams know they have to do more. Because San Remo is no longer really a sprinters classic, as we've known it to be over sort of the 2010s and 2000s, the last like sort of that period. It was very much a sprinter's race. Nowadays it isn't. It's about brute force and attacking away. I think the fact that we've had solo rides or two riders to the line every year since the COVID break probably demonstrates that how this race has evolved so greatly. And this year, yeah, it was very fascinating. You had the sort of intrigue of Pogačar and Tim Wellens with that sort of premeditated attack, and that sort of group of four going out, like the four horsemen of the apocalypse almost. Filippo Ganna, Van Aert, Van der Poel, and Pogačar riding together before Van der Poel made the winning move over the top of the Poggio. And I mean, it had to be Van der Poel to sort of get that intrigue as well, for him to get that sort of explosive biblical attack over the top of this hill and to go solo all the way to the end, to replicate what his grandfather did 61 years ago, I believe, and to win this race. It really was sort of a nice moment. It felt very apt for Van der Poel, who is such a sort of big moment rider. They talk about it in like basketball and football and stuff, about like big
Here we
match
go.
players who can sort of rise to the occasion. Lionel
It's a
Messi.
cycling podcast, right?
Yeah, I know, but it just drawing comparisons from the biggest sport in the world in terms of people coming at the biggest occasion and performing there and then, and Van der Poel does that almost better than anybody else in the pro peloton.
I think you're right. There is just that Van der Poel magic that we've talked about a few times on this podcast about just Van der Poel has his ability more than other people. He can be looking bad in races, and then it just comes around. He knows how to time these things, and I just loved how aggressive UAE were on the Poggio. I loved the Vellens and Pogačar 2-up attack. I thought that was amazing. It was so fast and aggressive.
We actually said that in the clip last week. We actually said that was probably because we were speculating how Pogačar actually could win this. There was actually, to be fair, there was one of our subscribers, Chris Wagner, who actually said that Pogačar was going to finish 4th. So
fair play. You got it right.
That was pretty good going.
Yeah. I just loved how it was just completely strung out, and then Pogačar it cuts to the front shot, and Pogačar is absolutely just ripping his handlebars, and it's just the most aggressive, scintillating attack I've ever seen. I was like, this is so cool. And like Cernklauer can't quite hold the wheel, and then Ganna closes it, Wout van Aert and Van der Poel. It's just 4 massive names in cycling, and there's some great pictures out there of those 4 riding to the top there. And I just don't think it could have been a better 4 really to go over the top. I think the only thing that could have made it better was if it was perhaps not just a Van der Poel solo victory. If maybe there was a bit of intrigue going up to the line as to who's going to win a sprint. But I do think, yeah, like Ewan said, the fact that Van der Poel is following in the footsteps of his grandfather is just a very ceremonious thing. That Van der Poel just keeps on showing his kind of, not respect, but kind of his connection into his cycling history, which a few riders have in the peloton, but Van der Poel is really able to show respect to that. And I think that's always a really nice touch when he wins, is that you can kind of throw it back to the connection that he has to his like ancestors. Ancestors makes it seem like they're ages, like hundreds of years old. Just his granddad.
Yeah, a race his dad didn't win here, so finally winning a race that his dad hasn't won.
Just very poetic. I love it.
I think that's what sort of adds to the Van der Poel pathos and his narrative, is that it is a sort of dynasty with Raymond Poulidor, then to his own father, and then to himself. And he's been a wonder kid ever since 2015. He won the senior world championships in cyclocross, and now since then, almost every year he's been world champion in at least one discipline. It really is fantastic to see, and to see sort of a nice ending to this story as well. With Van der Poel finally getting Milan San Remo under his belt. And I mean, out of all of those 4 guys, they all just bring something so different to the table. They've all got their own narratives, and I think that's what made it very intriguing. Maybe if we had a group of 4 that just, if it was like Mads Pedersen, Søren Carnesen, and Matej Mohoric.
Whoa!
With Pogačar.
Whoa!
No, but in terms of like the narrative that they all have, we have the tension between Van der Poel and Van Aert that's been there for so long. Pogačar is the most versatile Tour de France champion in the last 50 years. Filippo Ganna is the biggest Italian cyclist that there has been in a very long time. In terms of his prestige, he's also from this part of the country, and he's an Olympic champion, let's not forget. Adds to it. But between those 4 guys up in front, there are so many sort of yellow jerseys and sort of rainbow jerseys to be shared amongst them. On that final podium of Van Aert, Filippo Ganna, and Van der Poel, I think that there's probably a continuum of rainbow jerseys in multiple disciplines from 2015 onwards. Maybe even 2013, maybe, since Van der Poel was junior world champion.
I mean, we'll get on to Ghana, because I think that we all thought that result came out of nowhere in a way, but was absolutely impressive. But Ewan and I did this video on the Cycling Day a few years ago. Mathieu Van der Poel, how will he do in the other monuments now? He's won 2 out of, he's won Ronde van Vlaanderen twice, but now Milan San Remo, the one that was really hard for Gilbert to kind of try and win. How will he do in Paris-Roubaix, Liège-Bastogne-Liège, and could he even do something in Il Lombardia? He's raced them all, I think, already.
It was the COVID edition of Il Lombardia that he did, where I think he came top 10, but it was one of those days where it was so scorching hot. It was the one where freaking somebody pulled out on Schachmann in a car. Do you remember that? I know Van der Poel finished 9th, which makes it seem good, but he was quite a long way down, and it was quite a weird edition anyway in terms of the quality of the start list. I feel like the Il Lombardia course would have to be quite an easier edition, and Van der Poel would have to change tune a little bit and change his not his physique, but he'd have to change quite a lot to really be competitive there. But he's been competitive in Liège before. I think if he fully targeted it, he could certainly be up there. I don't see any reason why not when you consider that a lot of the riders last year who were finishing in that second group, like a Quentin Hermans, for example. I think Van der Poel was very capable of keeping up with a Quentin Hermans and doing something that he did. If a Remco wasn't up there, then Van der Poel could win that. And Roubaix, he can certainly win that. It's just a matter of the cards need to fall right. It's just one of those things you need the mechanical things to go your way, and it's just a bit lucky in that sense. But he's very capable of winning, I think, Roubaix and Liège. I think Lombardia could be a push though.
Yeah, Lombardia I think is the one that I sort of struggled to see. But yeah, he did finish top 10 in that COVID edition, which was a strange one. Kind of the second race day for a lot of riders in the year, maybe the third race day. It was very hot, very attritional. Time gaps were huge that day. Between the top three, there were like minutes, really. It was Fulsang, Bennett, and Vlasov. And I remember just waiting for ages, for the second place rider to come over the line. It was an odd monument. And yeah, I mean, Liège, we look towards that one performance he did in 2020. That was strong. Yeah, it was good. Also comparing Liège to Amstel Gold. He won that race in 2019, but now we're sort of 3 years into the future. Maybe his sort of physique is different. Maybe his plans are different for what he wants to do. But I think now that he's got another one, San Remo, ticked off, chances are he will probably podium Ronde van Vlaanderen this year. Maybe Roubaix podium this year, could go for the win. Liège is a bridge too far. Maybe in sort of 2025, 26, maybe he can go for it. He's not sort of crazy old, so it's not like it's sort of a ticking time bomb, like he's running out of time. I think he will probably get Liège at some point, or at least get a podium in Liège at some point.
I mean, yeah, we're all kind of trying to get this monument rider, and hopefully it won't be a Belgian, although we know he's born in Belgium, like Eddie Merckx and who's the other one? Roger de Vlaming. So, yeah, we're desperately trying to get this, but, well, I mean, will he do it? Paris-Roubaix is going to be a very interesting addition. As you guys said, he's been on the podium before, but yeah, Lombardia, I completely agree. I think it might be a bridge too far, but nevertheless, back to Milan San Remo. Ganna, absolutely scintillating sprint that left Pogačar and Wout van Aert for, spectators for that second place. What does this mean for Ganna as well? Like, we discounted Ineos Grenadiers in a way after Tom Pidcock wasn't going to be in the race.
Yeah.
They appeared at the front and we were all like, wait, what's going on? Who are they riding for? And then Ganna just absolutely incredible.
I think in terms of the Cobble Classics, I think Ganna's certainly a threat, considering that Pidcock is, I can't remember seeing an update, but how long he'll be out for, or, basically how limited is his training going to be. And then also you have to consider Ben Turner, he crashed in Omloop, so when's he going to come back? It immediately puts Ganna further up the pecking list in Ineos's eyes. I really consider the only other people who Ineos could consider leaders as maybe a Magnus Sheffield or Navarez, but I really consider those guys to be more domestiques, perhaps. I know that Sheffield did have a really good performance at Brabant-Sipel last year where he won, but expecting him to step up that much as somebody who's like 20 years old to be like, right, you're now leading the Tour of Flanders, that might be a weight too much for his shoulders just for now. But I think that Ganna could certainly launch a real good classic season if he can hold this form just for the next 2 weeks or so and to Flanders. I don't see any reason why Ganna couldn't do well in those races. His history in those races, I can't ever remember a significant result for those races. But, we never saw a significant result from Ganna at Milan San Remo before, and he's just finished second. So history doesn't necessarily correlate to future results. It's very possible that somebody can launch a surprise.
Best result in Flanders, 98th, and he's only done it twice. He didn't finish in 2018. That was 2019, though. He hasn't ridden it since then. Paris-Roubaix, best result was last year, 35th, but I think he had a lot of bad luck. Out of the time limit, didn't finish in 2018 and 19, but we know he won the under-23 edition. That's hope that everyone clings on to. Yeah, Ewan?
I mean, yeah, in 2018, he was a different rider. Rode for UAE, let's not forget. 2019 as well. It's kind of under the radar a little bit. He was a good time trialist, but we didn't know him as a classics guy or sort of the engine that he is. But yeah, this definitely was a bit of a surprise. Ganna was just looking so good. And for someone who's like 80 plus kilos to be like racking up the Poggio at the same speed as Pogačar, it's mightily impressive. It's a shame he's not on the start list for the Ronde van Vlaanderen at the moment, because I think he would give it a really good shout. But I think Roubaix probably suits his characteristics more, given that Roubaix, it's really a flat guy engine kind of that wins you Paris-Roubaix. We haven't seen many Paris-Roubaix since the COVID break, given that there's been such a big paradigm shift in cycling. But from last year, what we saw with Dylan van Baarle, I could see Ganna doing a very similar tactic there. And even just like hanging onto the front group in 2021, Ganna could have been there to contend for the podium. So it's definitely pointing towards good things for Pippo Ganna. If everything goes right on the day at Roubaix, I think he would really want to get a good result.
Well, we could talk predictions as well, because we were a bit with Milan San Remo. Honestly, I put him down in the previous show. Nothing happened. Patrick said Tadej Pogačar. You said who? And the World Tour Series prediction. Yeah, I said Mathieu Van der Poel for that, but I think I said him for basically every single monument. So I think, yeah. Do you think Filippo Ganna where is he gonna finish in this year's Paris-Roubaix, since that's the one he's down on?
Oh, it's tricky to say. I'll go with 7th place.
I think he's a sort of bust or break. I think he'll finish top 5 or he'll finish 20th, 30th.
I'm going to say Ganna on the podium, but that's probably not going to happen. Nevertheless, now changing the focus onto a women's race, and there was a big story involving a glucose monitor. What race was it, and which rider was it as well?
It was Strade Bianche, the women's Strade Bianche race, and it involves Kristen Faulkner, who is an American from Alaska, riding for the Jayco Alula women's team. She finished in 3rd place after what was a very strong day of racing. She was solo for a lot of it, then got swamped on the final climb by the duo from SD Works. She was announced as 3rd, went on the podium. She got her trophy. She sprayed the Prosecco. And then a couple of days later, the sort of controversy starts like brewing up. There's pictures of the sort of glucose monitor on her arm. It's like a circular dot. You can see it in a lot of the pictures. Eventually, the UCI addressed this and disqualified Kristen Faulkner from the race, meaning that her podium place was stripped from her on the grounds that she was using a banned piece of equipment. Of course, that didn't go down very well with both her team, and the glucose monitor providers, which are Supersapiens, and the Abbott Libre sensor technology that is used for the Supersapiens device. So she said that she kind of justified it by saying that the glucose monitor wasn't actually connected to anything and she wasn't getting live data. I don't know how we can sort of test if that's true or not, but regardless, I think she will remain disqualified at Strade Bianche. But this is sort of setting precedent. It's the first time we've had someone disqualified from a professional race, either men's or women's, of my knowledge, for using equipment like this.
Because I was going to say that I was thinking about this earlier, because there is the Novo Nordisk team, and that's like full of people with diabetes.
And also the Supersapiens, or the technology, it's the CEO of that is also the CEO of Novo Nordisk, Phil Sutherland.
So do they get an exemption from this rule because they're diabetic? Yeah. Because then this made me immediately think, right, how long is it going to be before... I don't know how beneficial this technology is. I know it monitors your glucose level, so therefore you've know kind of if you're basically running low on energy, you need to refuel. But nutrition's so like tip top nowadays that they know how much they need to be eating anyway. And how long is it going to be before somebody thinks, oh, this, if it is useful, I'm going to claim that I've somehow got some kind of vague diabetes, kind of similar to when back in the day people claimed that they had asthma so that they could get a TUE.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically, how long is it going to be before this could become a new grey area where people are like, oh, I've got diabetes, so I need to use one of these? And it's just like, I just feel like it's a dangerous rabbit hole that we could be heading towards, and I hope that we just keep it. I hope it just doesn't go to that.
Argument as well that for junior racing, if you have a junior popping up with this technology, it's separating, it's suddenly creating a level, not a level playing field, and suddenly these people, because they cost like £70, I think, €70, so they're not exactly cheap, but I think you have them for a few weeks.
Yeah, a couple of weeks.
It's like I think it's €130 for 2 weeks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And you have to replace them a lot. So it's incredibly expensive. You can get discounts, but it's incredibly expensive. The thing is that regardless of the cost, there is probably an advantage. You're getting live glucose data, although she says it wasn't live, but you can have access to that data. And knowing that is probably quite important to fueling strategy and knowing how to perform at your best. That's how they market this whole thing, is knowing how to fuel yourself and be at your tip-top performance. So there's evidently an advantage. It's like a power meter. I think people riding with power meters now probably know a lot more than people who didn't ride with power meters.
True.
So there is probably an advantage. If it was disconnected, then there was no advantage. But why would you wear it if it's disconnected?
I didn't get that. It's just like, if you know that it's banned and you know it's going to cause a bit of a ruckus, I know they cost a bit, but like, you're not probably paying for this. Just take it off.
Yeah.
Like, even if it's like, oh, but I've only had it on for a few days, I need to get my next extra 10 days of use out of this. It's like, but you know the risk that's going to come with it. Like, it's not like a discrete thing. Like, it pokes out through the jersey. Well, it bulges the jersey. You know, you can see it quite easily. I just don't get why they took the risk on that. It just doesn't make sense. I'm not even sure if you can get a readout to like your Garmin or anything. I swear, like, it needs to go back to your car and they tell you or something. It's like, I don't think bike computers have got to the point where they're integrating Supersapiens yet.
Maybe
it's connected to a phone app.
Yeah, maybe she was kind of like we were saying, using it for the 2 weeks, and this just happened to be part of that 2 weeks, and then she just didn't want to remove it because we know it's 130 quid. I don't know.
Or maybe this was all a big marketing ploy to talk about Supersapiens. They are very marketing savvy. Maybe this was all part of the this is all part of the plan, is that
true.
This would
they
happen.
Just want to get on
I feel like for Faulkner, it's too much to sort of be given third place and to lose a couple days after. It is a kind of prickly subject, if you pardon the pun.
Literally, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think the future going forward is that they will crop up undoubtedly. I know a couple of teams already use the data, but not in race. I think that's the difference. Where I believe EF have used it before as well. EF are quite sort of savvy with using these new technologies like Whoop and so forth to maximize their riders. But using it in race, that does seem silly when it's banned. But where is the line here? We have heart monitors that are used in racing. We have power meters that are used in racing. In road racing, at least. In track racing, you're not allowed to see them. Where do we draw the line? Because is this not the same? Is this UCI trying to gatekeep new technology and new innovation? Potentially. They've been doing that in the past an awful lot.
Yeah. But at the same time, because I could see somebody being like, oh, but you could have it like a graphic on screen or something. But it's like, yeah, but at the same time, right, Whoop graphics were put up quite a bit last year during the Giro, and it's the meme of like, oh, what's Hugh Carthy's stress score for today? Like, that's just a meme now. It's like, how do I live without knowing how much strain Hugh Carthy's under? And it's like, I just don't feel like people actually care that much about the statistics of all that. I mean, the only thing would be like, oh, look, somebody's blown up spectacularly, and oh, look, their glucose is low. But I just don't feel like people care enough about the data, unless you're like a bit of a cycling kind of nerdy kind of techie type.
Surely it's for the team in the team car, if that was it, or the rider. But like we love to say that cycling kind of repeats itself. This topic really feels like when power meters were coming out, where it was like, oh, we only want to see them in training, we don't want to see them in racing, they're going to make racing boring. Now they're going to become even more robots than they already are. They know their power, they know their glucose, they know their heart rate. It's just a scientific exercise now. It's not about the passion, the Julien Philippe attack, the Vokla attack, the Alberto Contador. Now everything is just measured to perfection. I don't know. I feel like it's becoming too scientific.
It's overanalyzed. We do have sort of data overload nowadays. We have teams employing data analysts. What is this? Goldman Sachs. It's extreme to some points, but you could also argue it as well by saying that, you know what? Part and parcel of being a professional athlete is knowing how to fuel correctly. It's knowing how to sort of read your body, and you have nutritionists working with you all the time to try to help you. Surely you should know how to sort of track yourself during a race. That is your profession after all. So maybe, then you could say the same thing about like, oh, you should know how to sort of pace yourself and to like use your power output correctly throughout the whole stage, which is pretty similar argument there. I get for people with who are sort of prone and susceptible to glucose issues, with diabetes, also suffering with other sort of eating and nutritional problems. I understand that they can get this, but they can also apply for a therapeutic usages exemption. There we go. TV, which allows you to use it. For the general masses, I don't quite know if it adds anything, to be honest. But then does a heart monitor?
Well, I think a heart monitor is quite good. The only reason is you can see when you need a rest day, I think, and heart monitors with power meter. But again, it's like you said, kind of data overload. I think that is a very good way to put it. That aside, let's not focus too much on glucose monitors. But well, actually, no. We should probably, between the three of us, what do you think it should be in the sport or should it be banned? I'm gonna say it's gonna. I don't want it in the sport for anyone but Novo Nordisk.
I know it's already in training, and it's like, do I?
Yeah, training's fine.
It's kind of
Training's
like
fine.
it's my thinking of, do I want it to be in cycling? No, but do I think that it will be? I think, yeah, it probably will do in a few years' time. I think that similar to power meters, it'll just come in eventually, I reckon.
Yeah, I also agree. I think I'm too ignorant on what the advantages will be. Well, in terms of like what the advantages are of using it, doesn't make that much of a difference. There's plenty of research to be done in that. There must be enough if it's being marketed as upping your performance and improving it yourself. They're selling it for so much, it must be good. Then I think it's fair to give them out on a therapeutic use exemption to certain riders who need it. Maybe we need to vary who needs it on a wider sort of availability to more people who might be susceptible to low glucose and so forth. But yeah, I think it's inevitably going to be part of the sport. But just a thought I had in terms of the safety of it, because we know the UCI care greatly about safety. Is it a needle into your body? Like is it like a I know it's like a circular thing, but does it like connect inside your skin?
Yeah, I think so.
If you crash, then that is prone to causing greater
good
harm.
point. The infection rate could be quite high as well if it's
like it's also kind of risky. There's probably plenty of research to be done in that field as well.
Yeah, it's a good point.
But yeah, if you're listening, Supersapiens, we're keen for a sponsorship. Ewan wants to try it.
Can I get a free one, please? Just give it a go.
But anyways, changing the conversation from glucose monitors. Yeah, well, the Vuelta a Catalunya is happening. We've got big names in there. Remco Evenepoel, Primož Roglic. We've kind of spoken about them, Remco and Roglic in separate videos. But Egan Bernal is also down on the start line. This was actually Patrick who wanted to talk about that. Egan Bernal, yeah, what's his future? We don't know how he's going to do in this race. We know he's still still on the comeback trail from that awful crash in Colombia last year. Was at the San Juan. Yeah, what do you guys think? What should Ineos do with Egan Bernal? He's one of the highest earners on the team, if not the highest earner.
I think it's still just a little too early to make a final judgment. But the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because, of course, he crashed just over a year ago, and it was a serious crash. But, of course, he's down provisionally to do a Tour de France this year. I think that's correct. It's just a thing of what are Ineos going to do if Bernal doesn't perform this year? Because they're going to be in a sticky situation where this is a person who they've invested a lot into. And if he doesn't perform this year, they think, oh my, he's just kind of taking up the payroll, which sounds really harsh, but it is in this kind of in the sporting world. You need to deploy your wages so that you can try and win things. That's kind of the purpose. And it's like if Bernal doesn't start performing, are they going to get rid of him? Are they going to be sympathetic and keep him on? Because I just kind of see this heading towards when Froome crashed. And then it was always going to make a comeback, and then he never did. Is it going to be the same with Bernal? He's had a crash, and it's like, oh, he's going to come back. But the signs haven't been that great so far, and I'm hoping that this Volta Catalunya, starting tomorrow, because we're recording on the Sunday, we'll see some good signs from him.
Yeah, I'd also quite like to see Bernal come back. He brings something different to Pogačar and Vingegaard, which would be interesting to see them all fight at full force. It's just felt like there's been a lot of question marks. Yes, he won the Tour de France in 2019, before the big paradigm shift of cycling over the COVID break. Post that, yes, he's won the Giro, but then there was that 2020 Tour de France. We had back problems that plagued the second week, and he cracked completely on the Grand Colombier and lost heaps of time. Pulled out of the race eventually. Then that back problem ruled him out for the rest of the season. He came back to the Giro and then didn't really hit the ground running at the Vuelta after a crash in the Volta at Burgos, I believe, in 2021. Then in 2022 had that big crash. Yes, that ruled him out, rightly so, for the season. Came back very slowly, and now he's got a knee problem, which takes him into this season and has delayed his start. I hate to say someone's injury prone, but it seems like he has been. I mean, he can't help it, I don't think. But it just seems like bad luck is like he's absorbing it all. He needs to be wrapped up in bubble wrap and sort of protected at all costs, because it seems like he's getting involved in so many incidents and crashes and injuries. Wasn't there a diagnosis in 2020 of scoliosis?
What's that? Oh dear, this guy can't catch a break, can he?
Sorry, he's got scoliosis. It was confirmed in 2020. How can he be a pro cyclist at the top level with scoliosis? They're like crunched up on a bike all day. Surely that hurts his spine.
But I kind of draw a comparison also when Jakobsen, of course, had that horrid crash in the Tour of Poland.
Oh yeah.
You have to also perhaps draw a comparison to that. And Jakobsen is, last year won a Tour de France stage, and he's come back to full force since that crash. Yeah, Remco as well, a Lombardia. That took Remco kind of like more than a year-ish to really kind of fully recover from that. So, yeah, I think that Bernal is certainly not done with, but I think that hopefully end of this year, I'd like to see something. I think realistically that would be about right. End of this year, maybe mid this year at the Tour, we might see some good signs. And then, maybe it might be next year that we really see full flight Bernal. But I'd love to see him, because we saw him win Tour de France 2019, and we haven't seen him go up against Pogačar and Vingegaard. Like, it would be great to see Ineos with their kind of poster boy from a few years back, see what he can do, see how he matches up against them.
They literally are missing that big head of state, or however you want to say it. But yeah, 2026, that is a long contract.
So many of these guys are now on long contracts. We're in a period now where long contracts are the norm for big riders. Pogačar is contracted for a long time. Ayuso, Almeida.
Where is Ayuso? What's he doing?
Ayuso's been injured for a while. I think he's coming back at the Basque Country. But all these guys, even Vingegaard, Wout, Roglic we'll see about that. All on a very, very long contract. I think it's just normal that Bernal was signed for that long. They have belief in him. Being on that money for a long time, maybe it wasn't the right financial investment, but they believed in him. When he's good, he offers up a lot. He's won 2 Grand Tours at this point. Been up there in Strade Bianche. He's done well in stage races. He won Paris.
The potential's there. That's the point.
Yeah. But with all these accidents, maybe every now and then we get sort of a great Egan Bernal moment, but it's not quite as sustained as Pogačar.
We're talking about that they desperately want to get back to the top step, very similar to Mercedes in Formula One, which is quite funny because they're both Ineos sponsored. But yeah, Danny Martinez, we've spoken about him. They got rid of Adam Yates. Sivakov has the potential, but now there's younger guns coming. Yeah, well.
Sivakov said in the French press the other week that he's taking longer to mature into a leader than he thought he would.
So by age 40, we'll see him doing good? Like, what? When's it going to be, Pavel?
Tom Pidcock, we've spoken about that as well. Him winning the Tour de France is like a wet dream for many British fans.
All downhill Tour.
I mean, he's...
Limited TT.
He's
not a lack of amount of top finishes.
Yorkshireman criticizing a Yorkshire rider, Yorkshire rider.
Yeah, I'm just saying. Ever since he just that crash at Tirreno, it shook me.
But like, do they have to look elsewhere for Egan and give him that time and then have some temporary solution? Yeah. Roglic was floating about last year, which was funny. I mean, that would be quite an interesting move, but I doubt that'll happen.
Just one injury, like crash-prone rider for another, basically. It's just. Roglic has about 3 get-downs a year. I looked at him. I was making a thumbnail earlier, right? And I was looking for images of Roglic. Looked it up on Google, Primož Roglic. About half the images are just some kind of battle-worn Roglic with some kind of scar on him. I'm like, oh, for goodness sake, I don't want this.
It's part of the story. It's part of the narrative.
It is. He's wrapping up.
He does.
Do you think it's this year we get Egan Bernal back, or is it next year or the year after, or will we never get him back? Like you said with Froome.
Next year. I think next year.
Because like with Froome, he has the best, like Ineos have the best staff, like probably in the whole sport. well, maybe Jumbo-Visma.
I would disagree. Jumbo-Visma do.
Yeah, okay, but
I
like
think
they're
the
up
problem
there.
is that Ineos, since this big paradigm shift, are struggling to keep up with other teams. Where Ineos going to do where Jumbo-Visma are doing different things, Ineos is still kind of riding a little bit like it's the 2010s. It doesn't quite work out. They've adapted a little bit, but they've been mugged a number of times, really. Last year's Giro d'Italia, prime example. Bora rode like a 2020s team, and Ineos rode the whole time like a 2010 squad, and they got mugged on the final stage by Bora. And I mean, it will take a lot. I think Bernal looks more like a rider from the pre-COVID era. That's when he won his Tour de France. Yes, he's won a Giro since then, but it wasn't the most competitive Giro start list. And I mean, looking elsewhere, they have a lot of really good young riders. Thymen Arensman, I don't think he's a Grand Tour winner, but he's a good young rider. I've always liked Laurens de Plus. He's a good he's not a winner.
Like Ganna, the new Miguel Indurain. Ganna,
Carlos
he's been
Rodriguez,
climbing well.
Maybe
Rodriguez is leaving as well. So
Rodriguez, that's a good shout.
Ineos, sort it out, man. What are you doing? I don't know who we're going to get because the thing is, scouting has got so much more crucial, and it's not like every talent's just like, oh, I want to go to Ineos because they are the winners. Because it was not like you say, it's not the 2010s where it's like, oh, they've got Froome and I'm going to go to this team because they're the winners. It's like they're no longer the winners. You know, you get young talent going other places, and like Ineos have missed.
Yeah,
a Ayuso, and they've missed Ita Brooks, and it's just like you got to get ahead of the game,
and
right?
maybe
Bernal.
And maybe skeptical. Looking at current sporting affairs, Ineos might be expanding into one of the biggest football clubs in the world, Manchester United, probably the biggest football club in the world, where we might have a takeover of Ineos and the owner taking onto that. Will they lower the budget of the cycling team, given that the football team will be taking up more of the focus?
It must be peanuts. The cycling team is like what Jim Ratcliffe just finds in the back of his couch. Oh yeah, here you go, guys.
Yeah,
he's using the team to promote a car that nobody owns. Have you ever seen an Ineos Grenadier on the road? No. There are a couple guys you think, well, maybe they could have used their finances better. They've signed so many children on long contracts. Michael Leonard, who's 18, Josh Tarling, 19.
Oh yeah.
Oh, Michael Leonard. Everyone's been talking him up like he's
he's a track rider. They've probably looked at his stats somewhere.
Yeah.
Pull up his Strava file right now.
Well, it's
that's what they do.
Brailsford said that he wanted to be the team to end the Tour de France drought of French riders winning it. How's that going? Like Kenny Elissonde didn't win it. It's not like they've signed any notable. Well, Pavel Sivakov, he could be the French rider.
Well, they missed Gregoire as well then, so they're just continuously just if they got all these aims and nobody's coming in. You miss Lenny Martinez as well.
Yeah, exactly.
I would doubt a French rider would move here.
True.
Any sense of integrity? The team is not very liked in France at all. Ineos, they're probably during the 2010s, ratings of the Tour de France went down an awful lot in France. People hated Ineos.
Really?
There was a general collective sense of, we don't like Ineos. We want anyone but Ineos to win. If you remember 2017 and that time trial that ended in the Stade Velodrome in Marseille, when Chris Froome came in, the boos were echoing round. People don't like Ineos in France. That might also be why they never successfully signed a French rider. When Pavel Sivakov joined the team, he was young and he was also a Russian rider at that point, before he switched his nationality.
Yeah, that's true. Do you know what Jim Radcliffe should do instead of his money? Make a British continental team instead.
Good transition. Our final talking point is about British cycling. One of the most successful, I would say, continental teams of recent time. I forget their name. Oh, well, it doesn't really matter now, unfortunately. But they used to be the Canyon team, the Canyon Iceberg. They've been such a good feeder team for so many different teams. And Tim Elverson, very nice team manager, unfortunately said that they didn't have enough funding for the remaining of the season, I think. And that team has folded with, very short
notice.
Yeah.
I know it just kind of came out. I know I just saw it the other day. I'm like, oh, blooming heck. Because there was some promise, like at the start of the year, I was like, oh, they got like Chris Lawless came and he was from Total Energy. And I'm like, oh, that's actually like a pretty decent signing. But they lost quite a lot of their riders to that. Oh gosh, what's it called? Black Spoke something, the New Zealand team that's the Pro Conti team.
Bolton Equities.
Yeah, Bolton Equities, Black Spoke. So like a lot of their kind of good riders went there. But yeah, it is a shame because they literally were really the last kind of hope, really. Like, they had a real good group of riders, and they would usually win a lot of the things on the British continental scene. Rather annoyingly to a lot of people who are racing, they just end up winning all the time, all the town centre races, all the road races as well. I guess the small silver lining is that at least those races might have a bit more competition. But it is a shame because it only leaves Samparan, because they are a continental team, and Trinity Racing. But like we've said, Trinity is more of a development team, and some of their riders do some of the British racing, but for a development team, they largely spend a lot of the time doing the under-23 calendar in Europe, which makes a lot more freaking sense for exposure than the British scene. And it is just a shame because it's just British racing just seems to be dwindling a bit.
I think the team folding is more of a result of a British scene that is not viable anymore. Hasn't been viable since COVID, really. There's been a number of reasons for this. As a whole, the racing doesn't seem to attract new people. I think that the racing scene is sort of attracting people who are involved in the racing scene, but not sort of other people. The races aren't broadcast live. Some are broadcast live to YouTube, which isn't easy. It's an open goal, really. But there isn't really exposure for the races. The results aren't sort of publicly available. The media sort of scene that works with it, so there's not really much energy going on there. They can't really, well, in terms of, from our perspective, from the media, a lot of these like publications who are writing on the domestic British scene can't afford to hire full-time writers or full-time content creators to work for them, which then just means that the content suffers and you can't get full coverage outside of what British cycling and the teams are giving you. And a lot of the teams can't hire communications people and so forth to keep the ball rolling. And because of this, sponsors, it's not particularly lucrative. We've seen that sponsors, I mean, they keep every national racing scene alive, but every British race seems to have some commercial sponsor or whatever as like a title sponsor. It's a lot more commercially backed than other racing scenes across Europe. So that's more sort of the British element of it. And now sort of post-COVID, post-Brexit, dare I say, there's nothing for young riders to want to stay. Well, I mean, it's the first time it's been mentioned on the channel, really.
It is.
There's nothing for young people to stay in the UK for. There isn't. This is why all these British young riders are moving to Europe so they can get their residency permit and they can work in Europe. As a rider, if you're based in the UK as a rider with solely a British passport, you have 90 days of travel within the Schengen area, which is most of Europe, for up to 180 days. During that time, it depends on country by country basis, but most of the countries are the same in this. You cannot work. If these riders are going to races to sort of work and so forth, it depends on what level, whether it's an amateur race or whether it's a semi-professional or professional race, then you will have to go through a visa process or so forth. The visa waiver, which means like the normal 90 days of travel, does not apply if you're working. That therefore makes it very hard for British-based riders to work in Europe and to so forth in Europe. That's probably why there are very few riders now who are based fully in the UK who are on the World Tour scene. Fred Wright is the only one I can think of, but he might have a second passport that we don't know of. It's quite easy for British people to get Irish passports nowadays. It makes it so detrimental where these teams can't look out elsewhere. They have to fill their racing calendar purely in the UK, and there's just not enough racing there. People aren't watching the racing enough to make it viable to create new races. We're not seeing new races evolve. We're not seeing the existing races innovate. The Tour Series has been the same. If anything, the calendar's getting shortened. They're going to the same places. It has good potential to be broadcast as a sort of late night sort of cycling program. They don't really live up that potential. Similarly, so the London Nocturne race, which was a good novelty, that was axed a couple of years back to bring cycling to sort of the big city area, which, to be honest, a lot of cycling in the UK is either rural or it's in sort of the periphery, which does make it quite hard to sort of cultivate new audiences. So there are plenty of reasons why it just hasn't, the sort of victims of a dead business model that's failing to rebrand. Is that in the hands of the team? No, they're victims of it. It's in the hands of British cycling. It's in the hands of the domestic race organizers and just the general British cycling ambiance, I feel.
Yeah, I think you touch on completely the problem there. And yeah, like the fact that they couldn't even get live racing to catch on like YouTube. Like normally when there's any racing, if you publicize it correctly, then, oh well. But like just to put it in perspective, Tour Series, as I think we're all pretty much fans of the Tour Series when it was at its height. But since 2018, well, in 2018, we had Canyon Iceberg, which is the team that has now folded. We had JLT Condor, which folded. Madison Genesis, which folded as well. One Pro Cycling, which even went up to Pro Continental for a year. and Vitus Pro Cycling as well, and then Team Wiggins, which is Trinity. But like 6 teams, and now it's like 2. It's really poor.
Over such
Denmark
a short
has
period.
more.
Yeah, I mean,
Argentina has more.
Oh no, how's this happened? I saw you said just the whole. I mean, COVID didn't help at all. I'd say obviously the main catalyst in this was the loss of the Tour de Yorkshire. Clearly,
That's true though. High-profile race.
It does make me seem like
Thanks,
I'm just
Gary
kind of like,
Verity.
yeah, it's just like me, just Yorkshire bashing. But it is kind of true. The fact that we had the Tour de Yorkshire in, it was like May, and then we had the Tour of Britain. It gave these kind of domestic teams, these continental teams, 2 opportunities to express themselves on actual live broadcast TV. Whereas when you got rid of the Tour de Yorkshire, all of a sudden you only have 1 event per year. And then the rest of the time you're just bashing around crits, just putting your collarbone on the line to get a freaking 50 quid preem or something on lap 8. It's just ridiculous how the mighty has fallen when we've gone from the days where we had so much competition and so many teams, and then just slowly they dwindled away. I don't really know what's the way back from this, though. That's the main question.
I mean, you spoke about the Tour Series there. It never attracted international teams or riders. There was the odd sort of international rider, Enrique Sanz, who used to ride for Rally.
Yeah, Rally's gone as well.
Yeah, and then Ampost, but then Ampost asterisk there because a lot of the riders were either based in the UK or in Ireland and the UK also have a specific common travel agreement, which is different to the rest of the EU. Now they can't do that. They had the chance to sort of cultivate an international market to sort of prove post-Brexit that, yes, our racing, it's really worth it. You should still come to the Tour Series, still come to the Tour of Britain and so forth. And that ship has sailed. And now they're failing to attract different teams, different nations to come to Tour Series. It's also an administrative nightmare, really, as well, for Wallonie-Brussels to come up to Middlesbrough to do a race on a Thursday evening.
Don't knock Middlesbrough.
No, I was just thinking of like a rogue place that's difficult to travel to in the UK.
Ouch.
But 100% Tour Series would happen in Middlesbrough as well. But or like Motherwell. There we go. Put in a Scottish example.
That's better. There
you go.
Nobody wants to be in Motherwell on a Thursday evening, regardless. I think the ship has sailed. It's going to take quite a lot to change it. I think the women's scene in the UK is probably brighter than the men's scene. However,
that's true.
The women's tour is now currently crowdfunding for its own success, which isn't a great sign, but they still have the Women's Classique, which came from the embers of the Men's Ride London Classic, which was axed as a professional race, which was sort of a good chance to get Walter racing in London and to get exposure to the UK for top level racing. But the women's racing is still going okay, although it's very England centric. I particularly noticed that I think a lot of UK racing is very England centric instead of pushing towards Northern Ireland or towards Scotland. Talent pooling from those places. It's rare that we have talent from Northern Ireland or Scotland really coming through. A lot of it is English or Welsh. Maybe that's also down to government funding because these are devolved powers. Scotland has their own funding for leisure and sport and so forth, which is why they're hosting the World Championships and why that's a viable option. But I don't know. There's so many factors that we don't necessarily know about that might also be factoring into the demise of British cycling. But the fact that this team has folded is not great news.
I would love to see Ineos actually as a British World Tour team. That's where their license is. How much skin off their nose would it cost them to run a development team? If they've got the budget, and I'm sorry, but they're not massively succeeding on their Grand Tour front at the moment. It's kind of like, how much would it cost them to really try and field?
$500,000 apparently. That's a continental team budget, give or take.
For 15, however many riders, don't even really need to give them you don't really need to give them bikes. Just most people have bikes. Just kind of do something. Just have a team which riders in the UK can aspire to get to this level, so that they can then they pay for them to kind of race abroad or something. Because at the moment all that people aim for is get to the Dave Rayner Foundation, hope you get some money, and then shift across to Belgium and hope to God that you do well in some comesses to increase your exposure. I just think that Ineos need to do something. I just feel like they're completely disregarding it, and it's poor for a British World Tour team to just be neglecting for a scene which is struggling when they have so much funding.
But then would those Ineos development kids want to be based in the UK? Because having that EU residency permit would change the game for them, which is why we're seeing so many of these youngsters go over to Europe at a young age so they can get their residency permit and get all the paperwork sorted so they can work professionally in the European Union. as a professional cyclist.
Racing in the UK as well. Like any race in Belgium, they'll close the road, rolling closure. But like in England, I think the attitude as well is like cyclists are the enemy. So like amateur races are never closed completely, which is a shame. And I think it feels like British cycling has dropped the ball here. Like we have the up and coming golden generation for the UK now, the Wiggins generation, if you want to call it, coming through. And then it's just like domestic cycling is just gone.
Yeah, it's so weird. We've got so many great riders going into the World Tour who are just full of potential, and yet somehow the domestic scene is struggling. It doesn't quite add up.
But on that very sad note, I mean, the three of us really are upset about this, so that's why we wanted to talk about it. But Riders of the Week, more happy, happy point, and we might all pick the same rider here. Ewan, do you want to start us off? Who's your Rider of the Week?
San Remo, I think, is too big of an open goal. So I'm going to say Lawrence Pithy of New Zealand. He won the Grand Prix Cholet in the Loire Valley this weekend and came second in the other Loire Classic as well. He's a really good up-and-coming rider from New Zealand. Rode a really good Nogueira Corsa as well earlier in the week, working with his Groupama teammates. He's so young, provides a lot in this sort of sprinting hardy classic mold. And I'm glad to see a New Zealander doing well in Europe at this level. It's sort of a shiny example of why a lot of these UCI World Tour development teams are doing so well. They're scouting good talent, moving them to Europe as soon as they can, so they can sort of flourish here.
It's hard for me to pick a specific rider. I would like to give my rider a week just to UAE Team Emirates because of the
That's not how it works.
I know, but
you can't just change the rules.
I'm going to
episode 8. You know the rules by now.
I'm going to give it to. I'll give it to Pogačar because I wanted to give it to UAE because they made San Remo pretty much. For pacing that they did, set up the race. And Pogačar, I'm giving my rider a week because his attack that really, I think, made the Poggio really exciting. Even though we didn't win, I just think that he you know what, he put his hand into the fire and he went for it when everybody else was kind of quite happy to sit in. So fair play. I rate the ballsiness of it.
Also, UAE was so good at Grand Prix Danan as well. Just adding to that, good team effort there. Miguel Biao pulling through.
Yes, they did.
Good signs. However, at the Coxeter Classic, they gave Ackerman the victory in a play and he missed it.
That's just Ackerman.
Oops. Oh yeah, we didn't even talk about that race where Gaviria nearly won a race as well, but Tudor Cycling prized everyone.
Oh yeah, Milano Torino. Oh.
But my rider of the week is not San Carlos in 5th, Mass Pillars in 6th. I'm surprised you didn't say Nielsen Paulus, Ewan. 7th place after everyone. Well, we thought at one point it was Magnus Cort Nielsen. But I'm going to give it to Mathieu Van der Poel because he made my prediction in the early video correct. So someone has to give it to Mathieu Van der Poel. Like, we can't not give it to Mathieu. Winning a monument and then you're not right over the week.
We forced it on you.
But yeah, anyways, that's it for our 8th episode. Make sure to check out our Twitter account, our Instagram account, and subscribe wherever you want on the different platforms as well. The podcast is available even on something called Podtail, which I've never heard of. So like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment down below who your rider of the week is, and as always, thank you for watching and have a nice day.